If you have an iPhone or an Android, you really need to be using lockdown mode. I'm Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic, and let's dive in. Now, the backdrop of this is actually some recent news, and John Brodkin of Ars Technica had a really good write-up on this, so we're going to just crib a little bit so you understand why we are talking about why you should basically have more security on your mobile device, whichever one you use. So, if you didn't know, the FBI, or Federal Bureau of Investigation, has so far been unable to access data from a Washington Post reporter's iPhone because it was protected by Apple's lockdown mode. And it was in that mode when the agents seized that device from the reporter's home. That's according to a filing by the US government in court. Now, the FBI agents were able to access her work laptop by telling her to place her index finger on her MacBook Pro's fingerprint reader, but they could not get into the iPhone. Now, this occurred during the January 14th search of her Virginia home, and basically the reporter, Hannah Natanson, is the one we are talking about here. Now, I won't get into the logistics of the legal battle that's going on, or even the politics of this. If you're a longtime listener, you know my preamble is cybersecurity is agnostic to politics, but we're not immune from it. But over this situation, essentially the FBI's Computer Analysis Response Team, or CART, could not get anything from the iPhone because, according to the government filing, and I quote, the iPhone was in lockdown mode. CART could not extract that device. Now, Apple says that lockdown mode, and I quote Apple, helps protect devices against extremely rare and highly sophisticated cyber attacks and is designed for the very few individuals who, because of who they are or what they do, might be personally targeted by some of the most sophisticated digital threats. End quote. Now, this was introduced in 2022, and lockdown mode, again, on the iPhone is available for the iPhone, iPad, but MacBooks as well. It must be enabled separately for each device. So if you've got an iPhone and a MacBook, for example, you've got to go into both, and we'll talk about how to do that. Quote, when lockdown mode is enabled, your device won't function like it typically does, again, according to Apple. So lockdown mode essentially blocks most types of message attachments. It blocks FaceTime calls from people that you haven't contacted in the past 30 days and restricts kinds of browsers technology that the website, like web browsers, can use, as well as limit photo sharing and other types of restrictions. Users can also exclude specific apps and websites that they trust from those restrictions. In other words, it's not letting you download potentially dangerous plugins. It's not letting you get a lot of message attachments and all of that. And again, you can exclude those things, but also understand that a lot of infections can come through things like iMessage, text message, et cetera, et cetera. I think pretty much everybody should be running basically this way. And as I mentioned, Android has their own lockdown mode, but also the newer advanced protection mode as well that works very similarly to what the iPhone is. And just given this age where people are traveling, and we've seen some step up on laws that say, okay, like Customs and Borders want your phone so they can look through it for social media, all these kinds of things, especially if you're an international traveler. These are the kinds of things that I would absolutely have enabled in my phone to prevent prying eyes, whether your phone is stolen or seized or whatever that is. Again, not adjudicating the politics of the day, but these are the important things that we should all be considering. And so with that, let's talk about the Android side of it as well, because I just explained what the iPhone side is. As I mentioned, Android has its own lockdown mode and also the advanced protection mode. So briefly, since Android 9, Android has offered a more simple mode called lockdown mode. It's not the same branding as Apple's, but it's conceptually very similar to that. Basically, Android's lockdown mode focuses on device unlock hardening, not full platform attack surface like the Apple version does. So when you enable Android lockdown mode, for you Android people, it disables biometric unlock, so you can't use your fingerprint or face to get into it. Also disables smart lock features as well. So if it's in proximity to like a smartwatch, all those kinds of things, you have to basically punch in your password or PIN to unlock it. So nobody can compel you basically to put a finger on a sensor or put it up to your face and all of that. It also mutes lock screen notifications when you put it into lockdown mode. And so it's really more focused on the physical security side of things. So if I'm going into, let's say, a potentially, dangerous situation, or a situation where, I may potentially have my phone seized or stolen or whatever, I can simply basically press the power button, and now I have an option. Instead of power off, restart, I have all of those, but I also have a lockdown that basically disables all those biometrics and the notification. Now, advanced protection mode, basically combined with lock mode for the Android, brings it more in line with Apple. And so by virtue of that, enabling essentially, this is what this does. This enables essential security features that would otherwise be turned off. It forces protections like a Google Play Protect and safe browsing. It turns on network hardening, so you can only establish connections via encrypted, like wireless encrypted websites, all that kind of stuff, HTTPS versus HTTP. It prevents disabling core security protections as well, again, to try to make the phone more tamper resistant. If somebody's trying to get into it. It also introduces new defenses like inactivity reboots and essentially blocking risky sideloading. So inactivity reboot means the phone is not hasn't been used for a certain amount of time. It basically reboots itself to go into BFU mode, or before first unlock, which is the most hardened and difficult, most hardened way a phone can be, and the most difficult way that an organization like CART would have to try to get around that. So the question that I always get is, Apple versus Android, which one is more secure? Which one do you like, et cetera, et cetera. I fully admit I am an Android user. I like the flexibility of Android, but when we are talking about just commercially available iPhone, which is really the only thing people are getting, versus commercially available Android, and we'll talk about that in a second, think like buying it just from Samsung, or buying a Samsung phone at your local, Verizon, Rogers, take your pick, whoever you use for your mobile carrier. I will say this. Apple's lockdown mode is generally stronger, especially for defending against sophisticated multi-vector attacks and malicious exploit chains. And we'll talk about that. Now, the iPhone in lockdown mode radically reduces the system's attack surface in ways that Android has not historically matched. Android is also open source, and that flexibility makes it tougher to lock down like an iPhone. But on the flip side, vulnerability management is, I think, better on the Android side. Remember, essentially, the worst infection or vulnerability exploit that we have seen on any mobile phone platform was Pegasus, and that was exclusively iPhone. Android didn't have that issue. I would also argue that Android can replicate equivalent protections basically to the iPhone, but you have to have more security-focused builds like Graphene OS, all of that. That's not something you're walking into like a Verizon's or a Rogers or wherever and just getting off the shelf. You kind of have to do that yourself, but that's the flexibility that Android gives you. So since most of you listening to this are probably like, okay, Nick, shut up about this, is it Android or iPhone? I would argue that you are vastly more protected in lockdown mode and advanced protection mode, whether you are using an iPhone or an Android and have that running. I use the advanced protection mode and lockdown mode on my Android phones and devices. And quite frankly, if they are seized, I feel much better about it. If I'm walking into a situation where I don't want to use biometrics, or at least have biometrics be available, I can quickly put the Android in lockdown mode. And the next time I open the phone, it's going to require a password. So food for thought on that. So let's talk about enabling these things, because in order to essentially enable these, and let's start with the iPhone or iPad, you basically have to open the Settings app, tap Privacy and Security, scroll down and tap Lockdown Mode, and then basically turn it on from there. So again, Settings, Privacy and Security, scroll down to Lockdown Mode, and basically turn it on. Now on the Android side, I think it's a little easier. You just open up Settings and you just hit search. And if you type in lockdown mode, it'll pop right up for you as an option. Go into there, and a lot of that stuff may already be enabled, but the one you want is the power option. So when you hit your power button for the options to restart and power off, now you have the ability to lock down, which immediately locks the phone and then disables biometrics. Also, you can then immediately search for advanced protection. It's under other. You'll see it right there when you when you search for advanced protection and enable that. As I mentioned, I run my Androids 24/7 with advanced protection mode turned on, as well as lockdown mode enabled for whenever I think I'm going to need it. So with that, in the age of diminishing privacy, let's put it that way, anything that you can do to ensure your privacy and your security, you should be doing. And these are very simple things that are offered to you by both Apple and Google. And quite frankly, we should all be using them. And so with that, best of luck to you, and I hope you stay secure. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please, please, please attempt to stay private, informed, and secure. Take care.